In 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at the Big1050.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side, and joining me as they do every Thursday in the 9 o'clock hour is the MGoBlog crew and the authors of the best. I want to say this is if we want to talk about great pieces of commemorative literature, I want to say this is the all-time best. You talk about national championship books and you're getting ready for the holiday season. I'm teeing you guys up. I'm teeing you guys up. The Christmas holiday is here. Steph Fisher, do you have it? Do you have the book right there?
I have the book right here.
All right. So
this is my gorgeous. This is Victor's. This is our 3-year book. It is very heavy, especially when you're carrying like a box or two of these things. I got this this gorgeous cover, which took us forever to get right. I got the 3 stripes because you're watching them walk away. Got this like it's tactile. You feel it when you open it up to any single page you want. You're just gonna find some memory that you. I mean, that's what this opened up to, right? And this is you open it to any page and you'll find like Samer still batting the pass away at Ohio State. You open another page and there's Aiden Hutchinson in the snow.
Every page is a smile, is your point.
So, I mean, even if you don't want to sit down and read this thing cover to cover, it's going to sit out in your front room and you're going to pass it and you're going to be like, yeah, that happened. And then every once in a while, you're going to sit down, you're going to just open up to a page and remember the Rose Bowl and be like, yeah, that happened. And really what we created was, as ridiculous Michigan fans, what would we want? What's the one thing that, we would want from this whole deal afterwards? And set out to create that. And it wasn't cheap, and it took the entire summer and fall and a lot of our lives to put this out here. But this was the one thing that we wanted to make to meet what that felt like for us, right? And have something to show like that we came through this and that was our part of it, right? Our part of it was we wrote about it, and it has some magnificent pieces in there by Brian. It's got my best work that I can do as far as X's and O's and stuff, and just really you can get into the nitty gritty and you can zoom back out and just remember how you felt in the moment before any of these seasons began. And then it's what we wanted to remember this by, and hopefully people are getting the same sense. I'm hearing that they are.
Yeah, it's incredible, and the pictures are great, the outline is great, the feel of the book is great. And for example, there's Brian's article about Lloyd Carr, just one of the best things I've ever written. And so I know Brian has some misgivings about it. I think perhaps I'm not sure why, but
he said that they were going to give a book to Lloyd, and I was kind of like, oh
yeah,
I hope that goes well.
Well, it probably will. And Seth did a nice inscription in it, so that's his Christmas gift. And I'm going to commend him to your article because I think it's really, really good and interesting.
I wasn't supposed to be a surprise as a gift.
I don't.
Surprise is spoiled.
Yeah, no, it wasn't supposed to be a surprise. Anyway. Yeah. But yeah, it's really good work, you guys.
Yeah. So you can find it on mgoblog.com/victors. You can find it on mgoblogstore.com. You can walk into an underground printing store in Ann Arbor and get it off the shelf. And it's also now at Schuler's, which used to be Nicola's.
There you go, folks. So great holiday gift, by the way. So be sure to go, and if you have a Michigan fan in your life, it's a great, great gift idea. Highly, 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 highly suggested if you're trying to think of something. All right, fellas. So listen, I hadn't brought this up to Tyra because I've been talking about the Buckeyes for I don't know if I've been on this Buckeye high, but new law in your home state, proposed law in your home state, there, Craig Ross.
Yeah, I mean,
Flag planting? Is that
it's hilarious, and it just shows how soft they are. The number one, it isn't gonna pass because even though they're pretty stupid in Ohio, they're not that stupid. Number two, it's probably a violation of the First Amendment. So I don't think it can. And number three, let them do it, even if they will, because it just shows how soft and weak they are by trying to pass such a ridiculous piece of legislation. It's nonsense, and
I thought this was
what can I
fake. When it
say?
came out. I thought this was like something.
Oh, maybe it is. But I don't think so because
It's not.
No, they got
no.
the lawmakers.
A guy from Sylvania. It's
not going to pass, but it's
not
no,
gonna-
it won't
yeah,
pass.
It won't get out of committee. But
Yeah.
they got the lawmakers, like, they asked them there, and they're like, yeah, man, this is a shot across the bow. We want them to know that we think that because we can't have this anymore, because this is, what we saw there, the violence, that's not what football's about. I'm like, who committed the violence?
It's like the tunnel. The Michigan
What is-
tunnel created the violence.
What are you mad about? They're decorating.
Hey, so the 11 Warriors, they got mad at Sharon. I'm sure you guys saw this. So Sharon, which I loved,
Yeah.
he walks into Chrysler Arena with Bryce, and he
Oh yeah.
he mimics the flag. He mimics the flag planting, and you would have thought he did some sort of he did some sort of like finger gesture or something at him, because this was some sort of sacrilegious gesture that he did towards them, because they were on 10 about it. Like, oh my God, what did he just do? This is just the worst thing ever, that he did some mock flag planting in his own arena. Like, you got to be kidding me. They wrote an article about it.
I mean, they've if there's any kind of engagement bait that they can post, they will post it. They've diverged from our path a long time ago. So
Yeah.
if there's anything that they can use to kind of get the trucker masses outraged, they'll deploy it. That's their business model, I guess. We like making big books instead.
Yeah, I don't frequent their site. So I always thought that they were Ohio State's version of you, but you're saying that
I mean, there's some commonalities there, but they took it in a different direction.
I see. I see. I get it now.
I mean, is there some sort of a connection to Marcus Hall's double bird going out of the Michigan Stadium? Remember that he gives the Michigan fans a finger or two fingers on the way out. And how did Michigan fans respond? They laughed at him.
Well,
and they're still laughing at him about it.
It's not even about laughing at it. It's about, like, he got over exercised. He got kicked out of the rivalry and gave everybody the bird. Like, there's a certain level of respect I have for Marcus Hall.
Yeah,
he went out on his shield, I guess. and like that is the kind of thing that, like, I think I can get behind. The whole, like, we lost and so we're going to be mad that you're doing a symbolic gesture and run up to you from 30 yards away. I mean, that's a little. I mean, I've expressed my opinion on this multiple times. Like, as long as it doesn't get to the point where anyone's swinging a helmet, I find these things, they add spice to the rivalry. And there's the announcers always bemoan it, but what's going to happen next year when they got to preview Michigan Ohio State? That's going to be in that, like, hype reel.
No, it's going to be how they lead the game.
Yeah.
Next year when the game starts, before the game, that's going to be the opening.
Like,
sequence.
these two teams don't like each other.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's fine.
I mean, if they're down to the spot where they care that much about a flag being planted, because this has happened all across college football, right? And not just last week, right? There's flag planting has been a thing for quite a while now after a rivalry win. And if that's where Ohio is right now, they are down to the last bottom. I mean, I don't think that there was a team that's ever been punked as bad as they were. Think about like the progression of all this, right? Michigan wins 3 times in a row every single time. Oh, they cheated. Oh, they had all their reasons, right? And they built all this up. And now finally, Michigan's not good. And Michigan was not good, right? And finally, like Ohio State spent everything in the portal. And they went out and they even got Alabama's best player to leave Alabama and come play for them. And that guy was great. Because like we are not going to screw this up again. We are going to do this the Ohio State way. And then they get completely punked in their own stadium. And all they have left, all that is left of Ohio State at this point is the symbology. It's just the trappings, just the decorations. And that's why this hits them so hard, because that is all they are at this point. What do you have to be proud of if you're a Buckeye right now? The trappings.
All right.
Well said, sir.
All right, let's get off of these Buckeyes. And so now to Michigan. OC search has landed on a guy soon to be named. I'm not sure when it's going to be final, but it'll be soon. And that is now former North Carolina offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey. Former Auburn and UCF. Trying to remember all of his stops. He was
Troy. Troy. We're from Troy.
He's the head coach at Troy. But set to be Michigan's offensive coordinator. And so based on what you guys have seen, either through watching North Carolina or over the course of your research now, that you've looked into, I'm curious your thoughts on Chip Lindsey, and I'll start with you, Brian.
Well, there's a few good things you can just kind of tell from his overall career. One, he came up through high school, so he, wasn't handed a silver spoon or anything. And guys who spend a lot of time at the high school level will often have a lot of different. They have a lot of. Sorry, my kids are yelling at me. They have a lot of different ideas because you have to innovate via necessity in high school. He's a longtime college coordinator, which is obviously something that you look for because there's difference between pros and college, and just like in terms of running a quarterback, he's done that from time to time. I think Drake May had a fair chunk of yards when he was at North Carolina. The kind of problems you see is that he hasn't stayed anywhere long enough to really get a baseline. Like he hasn't had a tenure longer than 2 years as an offensive coordinator in his career. And when he gets into a place, it looks like he does a pretty good job. Like last year, this UNC team lost Drake May and 4 or 5 offensive linemen and lost their starting quarterback in game 1, and they were still 34th in SP+, which is pretty impressive to me. So he has never been at a school that should probably have a top 10 offense. He's never had a top 10 offense. He's improved Troy. He improved Southern Miss radically after he got there. He did a pretty decent job in his other stops, but it's not a slam dunk hire, but just the shape of it, the outline, I think is like a pretty decent one.
Yeah, when you look and see what Michigan was looking for, when I'm trying to match like what our goals were. We're looking for a guy who can coach Bryce Underwood. We're looking for a guy who can fit into Michigan's system. And that's exactly if you want to look at like the two things that stand out from his career, Chip, everywhere he's gone, he's kind of grabbed somebody else's quarterback. Now, when he went to Southern Miss, the somebody else's quarterback was actually the quarterback he coached in high school, and that was Nick Mullins. And then he coached Nick Mullins to actually being a pro. And Mullins was the reason why they had success at Southern Miss. He goes to Arizona State. Manny Wilkins is already there. He kind of turns him into a pretty good quarterback. He goes to Auburn. Jarrett Stidham had already committed, but Stidham shows up in December, and then in January is when Chip shows up. So Lindsey coaches Stidham, and he had a pretty good career at Auburn. He's still in the NFL today. Then he goes on to Troy. There's he coaches the guys he coaches there were all There was a bunch of injuries and stuff like that, but all of them were kind of other people's quarterbacks that he turned into better quarterbacks. And then you get to North Carolina, and you get to May, and I skipped over UCF where he had Mikey Keene, and I should go back to that in a second. But Drake May got on the horn. You reported this, right? And said that this guy made me a better quarterback. If you look at the year-by-year stats, the stats are pretty similar, except he took a lot less sacks. And then I look back, and that was something true for all the other quarterbacks who'd played before that he coached. They take a lot fewer sacks. They actually run. They're all running quarterbacks. They're all guys who get between 250 or 450 yards per year on the ground, but they're usually not called runs. I don't think that he's really he doesn't want to. Now this is where I'll go back to the UCF point. The UCF they had injuries. He got to UCF right after they lost Dylan Gabriel. So he had Mikey Keene, who we saw this year at Fresno State, the ratchet arm small guy. And with Keene, he just had him lobbing passes, which is what he's good at, right? He's good at that deep throw or just dinking and dunking. He got hurt, and then they had to run with John Reese Plumlee, who was just a runner. And that's what they did. And they were 9th in rushing in the end of the season, or 8th in rushing in the end of the season, because they ran a quarterback's rushing attack. So it's a Gus Malzahn guy. The base of his system is Malzahn. But really, when you look at what his career has been, he's kind of the guy that you bring in if you're a running coach and you need somebody to coach your quarterback and give you a passing game. That's what Malzahn found in him originally. That's what he's done at every single stop that he's been at. And I'm pretty sure that's what Michigan saw in him as well.
Craig Ross?
I can't add to that. All I know is what I know from reading Seth's article yesterday on MGoBlog, which is excellent and which is a more in-depth version of what he just went through. It's very good. My one question is, so this guy's coming from North Carolina. So a bunch of he's coming from North Carolina. There's a bunch of guys in North Carolina in the portal. And some of them look pretty interesting to me, including a couple of offensive linemen, I think one of whom graded out at 84 on PFF. And so my question is, one, if anyone knows whether Michigan might be interested in any of the North Carolina portal guys, and two, whether this, in conjunction with Belichick going to North Carolina, means anything to Michigan. I mean, can he bring a player or two from there? Has there been any noise about that, or is it too soon to tell?
I mean, I think there will be some natural interest in whether he can add some guys, provided they are freshmen, sophomores, or grad guys, guys that fit those windows. Sure. The immediate guy that I was interested in is just not available. I think he's going to the pros, but I was wondering about the running back, Marion Hampton.
Oh yeah, we recruited him, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the one I was like, oh, is he available? But I think he's going.
Well, they've got a guy at their left guard was a guy named Aiden, I think it's Banfield. And he started as a freshman this year, so he has 3 years. Usually you start as a freshman at a D1 team. There's probably something there. And he's in the portal, I believe. And their center, who I think is a grad transfer, but he's not in the portal yet, might be of some interest. But I don't know. There's also a good linebacker, but I don't know how much.
Yeah, I would say any guy he has connection to, they're going to be hidden. Somebody is asking about Jordan Shipp, who they obviously wide receiver they finished second for. Not in the portal as far as I know.
He's not.
But yeah, I mean, that would be a natural one that they would be absolutely like. If Jordan Shipp hits the portal, Michigan would be he looks at undoubtedly, and they're looking at receivers clearly, and this would be his. There would be some dalliance at least there. So we'll see how it goes.
Isn't he pals with Jaden Davis? Yeah.
Jaden Davis. Yeah. Not just Jaden, of course. Channing Goodwin.
Yeah.
Will be another one. So there are all kind of ties. But this, I think is a very interesting one because I think he's enough of a departure from what they are to really be super intriguing. Because as I talked about, I think what Jerome wants is to leave the core of their run game intact. All right, now come and really add to it. Now freak it. Like I want you to run all our run plays. Now augment. You know, do whatever you want to do in the passing game. You know, give us some kind of outside run game. We don't have an outside run game. Like, you know, turn us all around. Give us some a real perimeter passing game. Like we don't have a real perimeter passing game to speak of. We want balance in a conventional sense, like what other people think of balance. We that's what we want now that we have a number one quarterback in the country. We want to be able to go out and get receivers, right? We want to be able to do these things. We want you to bring us that. Now, here's the irony of it, is that you talk to different coaches, and coming up, Chip Lindsey had this reputation as a pass guy. But you look at his most recent years in the equation, they say, hey man, he's running the football like a madman.
Well, he adjusts to his. You try to understand what his values are, and sometimes it comes out in stats, and sometimes it comes out in just who he goes after in the portal and all that kind of thing. His values seem to be trying to have the offense be what his players are, right? Like if he's got, I use the example when he was at UCF, right, where he had two very, very different kind of quarterbacks. One guy is like a 5'9" dude who doesn't have a very powerful arm, but really smart, Mikey Keene. So he runs a passing base offense. That guy gets hurt. They run a rush offense with John Reese Plumlee, and they're good at both those things. Now, the main the guy he's worked with most, it was at UCF, and he worked for him twice at Auburn, and kind of got some of his other jobs because of it, is Gus Malzahn.
Yeah.
So you look at Malzahn's offense. How do they get perimeter rushing? They always have somebody in motion, right? They're always going to have that slot receiver. And oh god, what Tez? What the guy at Oregon? The slot bug at Oregon right now. He played for Chip before too at UCF. They always had him running across, and that they always have that motion as part of the run game, like that jet motion. And Wisconsin used to do this too. And it's a base concept in that old Auburn attack where you always want to have somebody running to the side, and it can be a bash read or whatever.
This is getting weedy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. One thing that kind of jumps out to me is that this guy throws a lot of screens. So almost 20% of Jacoby Criswell's attempts this year were behind the line of scrimmage. And that's about double what Michigan was doing last year. And they're in 2024 Michigan offense was the offense that probably should throw the most screens in the history of college football that they just didn't. So he's going to be, I think this is a good move for Samaj Morgan in particular, because Michigan is going to be using a lot more wide receiver screens next year. And I think that's a good thing to add to the offense. It's not a panacea. It's not going to change the flow of time or anything. But when you have the ability to force defenders to respect three guys on the edge with 3 or even 4 defenders, that naturally is going to loosen up the box. And that's a good thing to have in the back pocket for what might be a young quarterback in Bryce Underwood. You might have a portal guy. Either way, there's a reason that when Rich Rod was operating an offense that had a heavy dose of quarterback run, that they used a ton of wide receiver screens. And obviously Bryce Underwood is not going to be Denard Robinson in terms of his run pass distribution. But, having that element in there is just something that I like to have when you have a guy who is a threat as a runner, because that often will put him one-on-one with guys for big gains. So I think that's going to be a positive.
Yeah.
You know, I felt Michigan was a terrible screen team this year, aside from the quantity. Thought the quality was dreadful. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out next year. I do think the guy will spread the field a bit more.
He
But
absolutely
beyond that, I don't know.
absolutely will. There's no question about it.
Yeah. I mean, I've looked at it, but I watched a bunch of his different offenses and looked at all of his different, teams he's coached. And as far as, does he have a system, right? He's not, he's the opposite of that system guy. I don't think that he's someone who's like, I need to run this and and we're going to recruit to this. I think he's on the other extreme of that where he can run. I mean, he was a high school coach, right? He's had to run everything. You get different kids every year and you go like, okay, this year we're going to put it this way. If he was the coach this year, they would have had a game for Orgy, right? When they realized what they had, he would have built the offense around Orgy and Orgy's strengths. And it would have been very different from what they end up running. It's not like he's married to a system. Now, he will spread it out. He will throw screens. But a lot of the places they went downfield a lot more, especially at Auburn. That was one of the big changes that he made at Auburn when he went to work for Malzahn. He said, you guys aren't throwing downfield enough. And he became known as the bomb guy.
But that's like also part of Criswell's profile. So almost 20% of his shots are 20 yards downfield or more. So it's not like he's just dinking and dunking, or he's just like, running the ball and going over the top. Like there's a big spread. So often what happens is you'll go into the PFF stuff and you'll look at like depth and where things are in the field. And there's going to be a certain clumping in the 0 to 9 range. There's always going to be a bunch of passes in there. And like Criswell, in a year where they didn't really have much of an offensive line, like they had questionable wide receivers, his numbers are really, really flat. So he's looking to hit all areas of the field fairly consistently, which I think I like.
Yeah, that was the one thing, if you want to talk about philosophically, that I think you could tie to him. He does not want to have a big clump anywhere on that chart. And remember Stan Parrish, I think, was the Michigan offensive coordinator who thought this way too, right? Like if they start trying to peg me as one thing, if he's the running guy or he's the throws downfield guy or whatever, then they're getting it wrong. Because I want to be threatening everywhere, everything at all times. It's not it's not like he's going to run everything, but that's his philosophy. He doesn't want to be clumped anywhere. He wants you to always be worried about where it's going to show up.
All right, we got to get to a break. When we come back on the other side, I do want to get some basketball in, but very convincing, I think, at least for Sharon. The tipping point, if you will, was you felt like he's gonna be able to expand the passing game. Could he develop quarterbacks? And you see his impact on quarterbacks that you've been talking about. He's made quarterbacks. Can you develop Bryce? Mm-hmm. This dude has touched quarterbacks, and he clearly has touched Drake May. Drake May had a lot to say about that, which I wrote about over on the Michigan Insider, so you can check that out this morning, that piece of it. As we get to a break, listen, if you are do-it-yourselfer, our friends at Chelsea Lumber, they're your one-stop shop for all of your home improvement needs. They have 3 locations to serve you in Chelsea, Saline, and Bridgewater. You can find them online at chelsealumber.com. You'll find great products, so by great people at great prices. They offer great service. Chelsea Lumber is where the home begins. They offer home construction materials, lumber, roofing, tools, decks, doors, windows, paint, cool work clothes, boots, everything in between. And of course, if you have those big home improvement projects, like kitchen and bathroom renovations, they are your headquarters. That's where we went. We had to get our kitchen renovated, our lower bathroom renovated. Did such a great job. Jen over at the Saline store was our designer. Amazing job she did. We went back, had our upper bath, our boys' bathroom done, master bathroom underway right now. They are second to none when it comes to design. Their Chelsea store, their kitchen and bath showroom been fully renovated, instant inspiration when you walk through the door. They are the best. And if you need them to find you a contractor to bring their designs to life, Chelsea Lumber can help you with that too. So again, from design to implementation, they can help you from beginning to end. That is the Chelsea Lumber difference. With 3 locations to serve you in Chelsea, Saline, and Bridgewater. You can find them online at chelsealumber.com. Got to get to a break. Back on the other side with more MGoBlog Roundtable here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at thebig1050.com.
Clear on the radio.
All righty. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, any chance you can get, they're sure going to go after UNC players in the portal. There's no doubt.
Does
Huh?
Does it feel like they're off to a little bit of a slow start? Like
They got some guys coming in here over the next couple of days. I know they had the what's the big boy from Kentucky? They got the big boy from Kentucky.
The
Silver.
defensive tackle, yeah, Silver.
His stats and grades and stuff aren't really like moving the needle for me.
Okay.
He's
kind of just a guy.
Yeah, you got to get some meat. You got to get some meat in the middle.
Well,
I think that's what that's about. I think.
Well, so the interesting thing these days is I think like prior years, it's like I'm not sure I want a guy who was a 5-star in the last year class and who was a freshman and decided to go. Because it's like, well, what's wrong with your current school? And now it's kind of like maybe he's just looking for some extra cash. And so like maybe those guys are less degraded in terms of like, because if there's like a 5th-year senior, like who's like there's some by the time Jack Tuttle enters year 5, his recruiting rankings don't really mean anything, right? But some of these guys who normally I would be a little bit leery of, I think maybe it's just they're looking for more cash.
I mean, there's always that Georgia 5-star, whatever that Michigan State gets that I'm not interested
right,
in.
And you're like, okay, that guy's terrible, but maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right. Generally speaking, we were talking about this morning. I'm leery of, like you said, the Georgia 5-star, the Texas Force, like my man who just hit the portal from Texas. That's from Bergen Catholic. What's his name? The big 350-pound defensive tackle. That hit Michigan recruited out of high school. He just hit. What's that dude's name?
I'm not remembering
today. Anyway, generally speaking, I am with you that I'm not paying for potential. I'm not paying for the 5-star out of high school that is, that's been on the bench for a couple of years and then he's hitting the portal. I'm like, I'm not with that. The Silver case is interesting to me. I'm interested in him because in Kentucky's case, I just see all of Kentucky's guys. Like their guys, seems like they're all going. Seems like they're all
like in 1 minute.
Well, that's a Kentucky thing.
I mean, we've been battling with Kentucky, right? Like that's been a rival in recruiting for some reason for us for a while.
Dane Key is leaving, and Dane Key
is Michigan talking to him? Like,
well, he's the junior. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're looking, but can you get in?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they got Jason Barham, and that's the kind of, when you talk about a 5-star that I want Michigan to go and get, I think it's a guy who's like that, who's been maybe 1 or at most 2 years at a school where it's obvious that his talent is there. It's obvious that he's, he needs a different environment to really become who he is. Instead of like one school, because a 5-star goes to Maryland, you get to be whatever you want to be. 5-star comes to Michigan, you still have to, you have to be Blake Corn, right?
Coming back on radio, stand by. We are back in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at the Big 1050.com MGoBlog Roundtable. And Brian, you were making I think a very important point before we went to the break, and what I want to pick up on before we go over to basketball. And more important than I think any specific portal target, and that's portal strategy. about what is your approach to the portal?
Well, so in previous years, if there's a guy who was a 5-star and is leaving after a season or two, those guys are usually radioactive. Like, you don't want them. Like, there was that kid from Clemson who went to Michigan State, who Michigan was interested in, who was a linebacker who washed out at State. Their entire secondary was guys who couldn't cut it at Georgia. And so, but I think with the House settlement coming next year, with the way NIL is moving, that a lot of these kids are hitting the portal, not because they can't hack it at their current school, but they're just wondering if there's something else out there for them. So I wouldn't be surprised, one, to see a lot of these, like, oh, this guy was a 5-star last year, kids go back to their original school, maybe with a little bit more cash in their pocket. But also, I wouldn't necessarily assume that these guys are washing out like I was assuming in previous years. So I think those guys are more viable, and you might want to poke around them a little bit more. Now, you also said that, like, Michigan doesn't want to pay for guys who have potential, and I think that's something that you do have to do a little bit of. I mean, Bryce Underwood, but if you're looking in the portal, yeah, production over potential anytime. Like a guy who, like, Barham started his first 2 years, right? So you had tape on him, you knew what you could do with him. A guy who is basically just still operating off his high school recruiting tape, probably not you're going to be your first choice. But also, I mean, that's kind of a swing for the fences in a way that, like, picking up an Amir Hall isn't. So you might get a really good player out of that guy if he's able to live up to the hype. So, like, it's a tough balancing act. And people, like, I posted on Offensive Primer on Monday, and I was like, I don't think Michigan really needs a running back. And I was like, they could take a running back, but how much are they going to want to spend? Like, now you have to think about these things in sort of like this NFL context.
Yeah, you do.
Where, like, if we have this budget, like, we need to pay a quarterback, we need to pay some offensive linemen. Do we really need to go get a really highly touted running back in the portal? I was talking about this when we were talking about Ohio State getting Quinshon Judkins. Like, what was the point?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see one.
I had a great discussion about this on signing day with Sean McGee. This very concept of sort of roster, the roster construct, and how you slot, how you assign value to various positions, and how much you're going to spend in the portal versus your recruiting class, how much you're going to spend at quarterback versus running back, how much you're going to spend at offensive line, versus receiver. All of this sort of plays and tracks. And then when it gets to the portal, what are you spending on production versus potential? Recruiting class, you can spend, the whole thing is potential. It's fine betting on potential and then recruiting. But when you're talking about the portal, it's different, because you have examples of guys who are 5-stars coming out of high school who might have been at a place, say Georgia, Ohio State, LSU, and they were on the bench for 2 years, and then they hit the portal, and they want you to pay them at a 5-star rate, and they have no stats. They've been backups for those 2 years, but they want that 5-star payout for backup stats. And it's like, well, I'm supposed to pay top dollar for backup stats, whereas you can go pay for this Coastal Carolina guy like Josiah Stewart, who has produced a ton at Coastal Carolina, and maybe you're better off paying for the production that a guy at a lower level has put on tape, and seeing if that tracks, if that translates to a higher level. So that's kind of the judgment that you have to be able to make. Does that production translate better than that potential from a Power 4 roster for a 5-star guy? That's what I mean when I say production over potential.
And you have to be honest about who you are and what you can get out of a guy. One thing that when I looked at Josiah Stewart's college film before when he was at Coastal Carolina, and it stood out also when I looked at Jay Barham, stood out when I looked at Ernest Hausman. Those are guys who Michigan could get a lot more out of than you saw at their previous schools. They were good players at their previous schools, but Michigan, the way that they play, the way Michigan uses linebackers, the way that Michigan practices and prepares and trains, they were able to get more out of Jay Barham than they ever could have been at Maryland. You get more value if you can pick a guy that you are going to get more out of than you have there. The way that they were using Josiah Stewart at Coastal Carolina, that was not the best version of Stewart. The best version of Stewart is what you're seeing now, where he gets heavy and he can stop an edge and he can also go around a guy, right? That's an NFL defensive lineman, and that's not what he was. He was an outside linebacker when he was at Coastal Carolina. Ernest Hausman, they were using him as kind of like a big nickel. And so like you look and see what you can do with a guy. And get more out of him. And I think that's what Michigan needs to do when they're in the portal. Hit that tape, see what kind of player there is, and see what more value you can get out of him. But you're talking. The other side is like guys that you get less value out of than they're worth. And in this world, you're in a salary cap world now. You have to figure out how to get more value out of your dollars.
Yeah, somebody brought up in the chat. I wanted to get to basketball. Somebody brought up in the chat a guy we talked about. I want to say 5-6 weeks ago. However, when we first started talking about Miller Moss, I think Miller Moss is starting to get it. Now that he's in the portal, all of a sudden it's feeling a little different. The idea of Bryce. When we brought up Miller Moss, all of this, it wasn't just happenstance that we brought Miller Moss up.
Mm-hmm.
He was feeling Michigan before all of this happened. Him in the portal and the Bryce happened. But it's feeling a little bit different now. But we mentioned Brendan Lewis, the Nevada quarterback, because Devin and Al, Daniel, you don't know what game they did, but Devin and Al, was it the Boise State that they played? Anyway, they were watching this dude play, and he balled out, and they're like, man, this would be a dude for them to jump on. Brendan Lewis is in the portal. That would be a dude. That would be a really nice pickup. Now, would Brendan Lewis want to come in with a Bryce? I don't know, but it's worth kicking the tires. That would be a great pickup.
You have to sell him on like, hey, you're going to win the Heisman, go to the NFL next year. Right?
Well, he's going to be a super senior, right? Like this is year 6 for him. He has a COVID year. So like for him, like, I mean, it's probably just going to come down to the dollars because it's not certain that he has an NFL future. So, and I don't think that you really have to be too stressed about Bryce Underwood in year 1. The kid won't turn 18 until August. He's going to have a package, right? There's no question about that. But yeah, I mean, Lewis is a guy who like jumped out as plausible. There was an ESPN article listing 25 quarterbacks. Most of them weren't that 1-year stopgap, but one guy who poked out to me who I thought would be pretty decent is actually Billy Edwards of Maryland. Now you have to take this in context. Maryland had the worst offensive line in America. They were 133rd in pass blocking and 133rd in run blocking per Pro Football Focus. So like they had him throwing 46 times a game, and for him to have the results that he had behind that offensive line seems fairly encouraging to me. And if you import him to Michigan and you're like, you can throw 25 times a game here, I think he would be a reasonably productive stopgap. The problem with this portal is there aren't really a whole lot of options out there. It's not like last year when Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel were stopgap senior options in the portal. It's a lot thinner this year, which is why I think Miller Moss is having some eyes opened.
Well, I'm hoping that I'm not making Ira mad, but I think Billy Edwards. See, now I think Billy Edwards is not just a put it this way. That's not just some name to be thrown out there. Let's just put it that way.
All right.
Is he in the portal?
No, not yet. So, but they were.
So you have to talk to his agent.
Let's just say
in one piece next year, he should go in the portal.
ESPN said that he was the guy. ESPN reported that he was the guy that would be likely headed to the portal. I'll just say that. ESPN
So,
reported that.
so
Yeah.
he's 4th and inches into the portal, and he's lining up for a sneak right now. Is what
Well,
we're saying.
ESPN reported he was likely a guy headed to the portal, and his offensive coordinator was fired. So
Wow.
these are two things that are noteworthy.
And he got replaced late in the year by MJ
Mhm.
Morris.
Right.
So, like, does he want to play behind that offensive line? Does he want to play for a new offensive coordinator? Does he want to have MJ Morris threatening his job? I don't know. But I felt like I evaluated everybody in that article who had 1 year left. And to me, he was the guy who seemed like the most likely to succeed in whatever context Michigan can provide for him. And then the other thing that is going to be really important is offensive line. I don't know how many guys they're looking for, but they probably need a tackle, especially with Gentry hitting the portal. They probably need a guard. Like, it's possible one of those guys in the 2023 class is going to be on the Zinter track and is going to be a good player in year 2, but we haven't really heard it yet. We haven't heard the talk about it. Like, usually when a guy like Zinter comes in, like, I remember that when he was a true freshman, you were already swearing up and down that he was going to be a guy, Sam. So not sure we have quite that yet. So, I mean, that's kind of the main thing I'm looking out for. Like, defense, you want to add some pieces, but it seems like it's mostly okay. And then, but obviously, when you're rebuilding one of the worst offenses in America, you need more than one guy.
Yeah.
Well, I like Josh Thompson at Northwestern, who I think Michigan may be involved with. He's he's a grad, so he's got just 1 year left, but he's a good. I think he's good. I think that he graded out well with PFF, and he would be a good fit for an inside offensive lineman, and also the guy I mentioned before from Carolina, who would seem like he's already in the portal, and with the coordinator coming across, it would seem those two.
And Josh Thompson is like, man, come home. But
Yeah,
now,
he's from Fenton.
yeah, now all of a sudden everybody wants him though.
Yeah,
everybody wants, like LSU and Bama, and everybody's all over the guy. But,
Mhm.
so it's not gonna be easy to get him to come home. But he's supposed to come on a visit. So, you'll see, and hopefully Pre gives him an endorsement. And you can make it happen. May give him a good financial package, and hopefully he'll want to be closer to home, come and play. And so we'll see if they can make that happen. I wanted to get some basketball in. I mean, now we only have a couple of minutes. Just a real quick segue. Fellas, I feel like whoever wrote the scouting report on Danny Wolf was it was wrong. It was not, and I'm not talking about you guys. I'm not talking about your scouting report. I'm talking about what I read about Danny Wolf coming in the door was not accurate. It did not accurately depict his full skill set, because he is better than advertised. I'm curious, were you guys expecting what we have seen from him so far?
Well, I said this on our show, and I got a lot of fish eyes. I mean, because I actually went back and looked at a whole lot of his tape, and I said, this is not what you think. This is not some 7-foot guy who can't move his feet. This is in fact, my exact words were, and he's a 5'10" kid with extraordinary skills, except he's 7 foot tall. He's playing in his driveway, and that's who he is, and that's what I said. Yeah, he's a remarkable basketball player, and really the key player on the team. I mean, people were talking like Vlad would be sort of the core of the team. Vlad has a lot of value, but Danny Wolf is the guy, and I'm a little fearful that someone in the NBA is going to see that, and this may be it for him. I don't know. Talk about paying someone. That's the guy I want to pay.
Mhm.
So.
When I was I think we saw a couple things in this last game with Arkansas is that Michigan has a cap on their athleticism, and it's a B+ cap. So I don't think it's going to give them a hard time that much in the Big Ten. But when you see them, and this happened against Wake Forest too, when they meet a guard who can just blow by them, that's the limit. That's where they get to that's where they can only go so far, and that's how far this team can go. But that's pretty darn far. And with Wolf, I've been waiting for his turnover rate to get under 30 so I can give him the danger man star in my charting. But yeah, he's he's the tallest 5'10" guy I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, I wish we had more time to talk about the Arkansas game, and maybe we will, because it was a remarkable game. And a lot of the commentary on it I thought was right, but also wrong. Because in the end, Michigan wins this game if they can make a damn free throw. And, and they turned it over 17 times, which is terrible. But I have a fear this team is going to turn the ball over.
Well, a 2-point game and 35 things that you could say got 2
Right.
points. So,
but
yeah.
but the thing that's the easiest to control, is just making some free throws. And for in the Iowa game, this is incredible. We had, I think the turnovers in Iowa were 17-4.
Yeah.
And we also gave up an additional 4 offensive rebounds. They had 20 more shots in that game, and we still managed to win. And it could have been the same thing here if they just make a couple free throws.
Well, but you don't want to be operating from a shot volume deficit.
Well, but they're going to. I fear though.
Guys, Ira is going to kill Sam if we don't cut this now.
All right. Well, we can talk about it again
next week. We got to pick it up next week. All right. That's
go
good.
See women's basketball. It's remarkable.
We're gonna see you next time with the next edition of the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA.